Good evening, 5th and 6th graders. It's Mr. Pedigo here at the homestead, and today we're talking about the legend of Romulus and Remus and the founding of Rome. We're kind of making a transition from our Greek history unit into our ancient Rome studies. So, I want to begin this by talking about the two brothers Romulus and Remus. They're described to us in legend as being abandoned and then being raised by a mother wolf. And I think that the wolf kind of is a symbol of power and, being isolated. Think about a lone wolf. So these brothers are raised in this myth by a lone wolf, a mother, and it's kind of a reflection of the intensity that the Roman Empire in the future comes to be known for. The two brothers, Romulus and Remus, they both look for a sign because they have an argument about who should be the founder of the city, which will eventually be called Rome. And they both claim that they found favor in the eyes of the gods by looking for omens. I think they look for birds or signs from the gods, and they have an argument. And what happens is sort of similar to the story of Cain and Abel. We hear about two brothers murdering, one brother murdering the other in the story of Cain and Abel. In the same way, we hear about Romulus killing Remus in the story and going on to create the Roman Empire, at least as the legend tells us, okay? I'm going to read to you a bit from Famous Men of Ancient Rome by Greenleaf Press and make a bit of commentary on it. Stay with me, I'll try to make it short, okay? Romulus founded Rome in the year 753 BC. After he had built the city, he had some difficulty in getting people to live in it. He had only a few followers and was not able to obtain any more. He decided to make Rome a place of refuge. He made it known that the people might come to Rome for safety if they'd gotten into trouble in other countries. And so people who had been driven out by their home by enemies or had fled their homes to escape punishment for crimes they had run away for one reason or another came to Rome in large numbers. It was not long until Rome was full of men. There were men from many different tribes and countries. Thus the Roman nation began, and for years it steadily grew and prospered. But the Romans were much troubled about one thing. A great many of them had no wives. The women of the neighboring tribes would not marry them because the Romans had a bad reputation, because they were hosting criminals. Romulus was very anxious that his people should have good wives, but how he should get them really puzzled him. And at last he had a plan. He sent messengers to the cities all around to announce on a certain day a great festival in honor of the god Jupiter would be held. There would be sports, horse racing, combat, all sorts of merrymaking. People were invited to attend the festival and to take part in the contest for prizes. When the festival day came, a multitude of men and women from far and near assembled before the walls of Rome. Hundreds of beautiful women were in their fine dresses there. A great many came from the Sabine tribe. The Sabines were a tribe of warriors that lived on the mountains, in the mountain areas near Rome. Suddenly Romulus blew a loud blast upon his horn, then quick as a flash the Romans seized the women and bore them off to Rome. That means took them away to Rome. The Sabines were greatly enraged at this. Their king, Titus, raised a large army and once began a war against the Romans. The war went on for 3 years. But the Sabines were so strong that Romulus could not defeat them in the field. He therefore withdrew his army into the city. King Titus quickly marched after him, resolved to take Rome or perish in the attempt. Now Romulus had built a strong fortress on a hill to keep out invaders of Rome. The hill was called Saturnine Hill, and the fortress was in charge of a brave Roman captain. The Sabines reached this fortress, they could go no further. They marched up and down, seeking for a spot where they might find an entrance, but they could not find one. There was a small barred gate in the fortress, and through this gate, a person came out to get water, a woman. And King Titus saw her, and at once he stepped forward and said, "Fair maiden, open the gate and let us in. If you do, you shall have a great reward for anything you ask." The woman was gazing with admiration at the golden bracelets which the Sabines wore on their arms. "I will open the gate," she said, "if you will give me some of those things which you soldiers wear upon your arms." King Titus agreed, and she opened the gate. As the Sabines strode past the silly maiden, each threw at her not his bracelet but his shield. The shields were round or oblong, either made of bronze or wickerwork or oxhide covered with plate metals. They had 2 handles at the back. They threw these at her in such a way that she could not move or get up or down. When they saw her dead, they took upon the shields they had thrown her, and they hurled her body from a great rock that was near the gate that she had opened. The rock was afterwards known as Tarpeian Rock, named after her. For hundreds of years, the punishment for traitors in Rome was to be thrown from this rock. Here we see some similarities, I think, in the way that the Spartans behaved. And I think that we're going to see that the Sabines are eventually taken here. And we talked about their wicker shields being covered in bronze. You know that the Greeks, one of the reasons that they were able to defeat enemies such as Darius or even Xerxes was because of their superior weaponry. And I think the Sabines are going to be sadly taken for because of their not so great weaponry. As soon as they passed the fortress, the Sabines ran down the hill to make an attack on Rome, but Romulus and his band of warriors bravely came out of the city to drive back the enemy. The 2 forces met in the valley, and a fierce battle began. Whew. While they were fighting, a crowd of excited women came running from the city. They were the Sabine women who the Romans had stolen. Some of them had their infants in their arms. They began to rush between the lines of soldiers and beg that the fight should stop. "Don't fight any more for us," they said to their fathers and brothers. "We love the Romans. We've married them. They've been good to us. We don't wish to leave." Of course, this settled the matter. Romulus had a talk with the king, and they agreed to not fight anymore. They also agreed that the 2 nations should be as one. They joined their governments and their armies, and each of the kings had equal power. Soon afterwards, King Titus died. Then Romulus ruled alone for nearly 40 years. He was good and wise and a king, and he did a great deal of good for his people. He established a body called the Senate to help him in important affairs of the government. Now the Senate, this was established in about 509 BC, is when we're hearing about this story, okay? When the Senate was established, this was roughly 19 years before the first Persian invasion in Greece. So this is what's happening in Rome, in Italy, at the same time that things are really going down, clashes between the Persian and the Greek Empire. For those of you who don't know, a Senate is part of a republic. And a republic is a type of government in which people elect leaders to make laws for them. Where were we? It was called the Senate from senex, the Latin word for old man, and it was formed of chiefs or old men of the earliest settlers in Rome. The descendants of those settlers were called patricians, or fathers, from the Latin word pater, meaning father. We hear this in also the Lord's Prayer in Latin, Pater Noster. Yeah. They were nobles or upper class. In Rome, the ordinary citizens were called plebeians or plebs, a Latin word for common people. Romulus took care to train up the young Romans to be good soldiers. Outside the city, along the bank of the Tiber, there was a great plain in which later times was called Campus Martis, or the Field of Mars. Mars being the god of war. Here the Roman soldiers were drilled. They were taught how to use spears and javelins and sword and shield. They were also exercised by running, jumping, wrestling, swimming, carrying heavy loads. Thus the young men of Rome were made fit to bear the hardships of war and to fight and win battles for their country. Sounds an awful lot like the Spartans, doesn't it? It is related that in his old age, Romulus suddenly disappeared from earth. He called his people together on a great field one day, and while he was speaking to them, a violent storm came up. The rain fell in torrents, and the lightning and thunder were so terrible that the people fled to their homes. When the storm was over, the people went back to the field, but Romulus was nowhere to be found. It was said that his father, the god Mars, had taken him up into the clouds in a golden chariot. The next morning early at dawn, a Roman citizen named Julius saw a figure descending from the heavens, had the appearance of Romulus, and it approached Julius said, "Go and tell my people that it is the will of the gods that Rome shall be the greatest city of the world. Let them be brave and warlike, and no human power shall be able to conquer them." Afterwards, the Romans worshipped Romulus as a god under the name Quirinus, which was one of the names of the god Mars. So he's worshipped as an aspect or kind of a part of the god of war, Mars. They built a temple on a hill which is now called Criminal Hill. This kind of sets the stage for where we are right now in the history of ancient Rome. We're going to see that in roughly 100 BC, the Romans will come to rule the vast majority of the land surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. So to recap, Rome founded 753 BC. We see a senate and a group of people as part of a republic emerge in the ripe old year of 509 BC, only 19 years before the Battle of Marathon in Greece when the Greeks fought the Persians. And we see that by 100 BC, and that's roughly 223 years after the death of Alexander the Great, Rome rules most of the Mediterranean world. So be prepared, be ready for the ancient Roman Empire. See you next time.